Hello knitters, in this segment we are going to learn how to do the knit stitch. So I have stitches on my needle. Now we just cast these on using a knitted cast on, and the way we're actually going to knit these stitches is very similar to the way we cast them on. So I'm just going to move these stitches up a little bit, just the way we did when we did a knitted cast on. I am going to put my needle into that stitch, and the first time I'm going to show you how to do this with my yarn in my left hand, and I will switch on the next row. I'm going to wrap that yarn around same way that we did before, pull the loop through that stitch, but now instead of putting this stitch back on the needle the way we did for a knitted cast on, we're going to take this stitch and drop it off the needle. So we have a stitch on the right needle that we didn't have before. We've got one less stitch on the left needle because we knitted it and moved it to the right needle. So let's knit again. I'm going to put that needle through the stitch, wrap the yarn around, pull that loop through. Now I'm going to take this stitch off the left needle. It's staying on the right needle. So I'm knitting the stitch, then dropping it off the left needle, and the new stitch that I just knit is remaining on the right needle. So again, go through that stitch from the bottom up. Right needle is now in the back of the left needle. I'm going to wrap the yarn around, pull a loop through, and then take the stitch off the needle. Okay, do that again. So up to this point, what you're doing is exactly the same as what you did to do a knitted cast on. But at this point, I'm going to remove this stitch from the left needle. And the stitch that I just made is on the right needle, and the stitch below it is the one that we moved over. So again, bring that stitch in, wrap the yarn around, pull that loop through, and then let this stitch off the left needle. Okay, now we are on our last stitch. We're going to do exactly the same thing. Wrap the yarn around, pull that loop through. I'm going to take this stitch off the needle, so there will be no stitches left on the left needle. They've all been transferred to the right needle, and as you can see, we actually have a row of stitches here that we just knit. Now I'm going to transfer all these stitches that went from the left needle to the right needle and just switch hands, so that all the needle with all the stitches on it is now in my left hand. We're going to do the process exactly the same way. I'm going to demonstrate it with the yarn coming from my right hand instead. Process stays the same. Needle goes into the stitch. We wrap around from back to front, pull that loop through, drop the stitch off the needle. So we're still going through, wrapping around, pulling that loop through, and then pulling the stitch off the needle. Once again, wrap it around, pull that loop through, take it off the needle. So make sure you're wrapping from back to front. Pulling that loop through and then pulling this stitch off the needle. I'm going to have a little problem with this stitch. I split the yarn a little bit. So you should try it knitting both ways, with yarn in your right hand and yarn in your left hand. You'll probably feel that one way is more comfortable for you than the other way. Oops, now I'm back to my last stitch. Pull that loop through, take this stitch off the needle. Now if you look, you'll see that our knitting is starting to grow. So when we put stitches, when we cast on, we put stitches across our needle. Now we're starting working in this direction and creating more fabric. Things to remember when you're doing the knit stitch is when you start, the needle with all the stitches on is going to be in your left hand, whether you're having the yarn held in your right hand or your left hand. Your work should always be facing to the right when you're starting, and your yarn should also always be in the back. So that's knitting the knit stitch.